Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Vanessa Scotto, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Brooke Thomas. On the show, we're talking about being students on the embodied spiritual path. And what does that actually mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything? All the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life. We'll be attempting to sort that out for ourselves here on the show, and we're always so glad you're listening in. In today's episode, we're literally doing the work on our own internal reactions to current events. In the aftermath of the 2016 U.S. election, there's been a lot of emotion and reactivity in the air, and we are feeling it. So we're using this moment as an opportunity to give you an inside look at how we actually confront our own wounds and triggers that are up. From talking about our personal experience to utilizing Byron Katie's process called the work, we're having a frank exploration of how to confront and heal old traumas. If you're enjoying the show, we'd be totally delighted if you left a review for us on iTunes. It helps us know how we're doing, but it also helps people to find the show and grow what we hope is a nice, nourishing community over time. For those of you who know us, you may also know that Brooke and I have potty mouth, so go ahead if there are kiddos and pop in those headphones. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so today is November 14th, 2016. It is the first episode that Vanessa and I have recorded since the U.S. election. And I'll start by saying that Vanessa and I typically are very, very politically agnostic people. We're actually known to be that way among our groups of friends, in particular, that we're the ones that just don't need to make things political. And certainly we're not going to make things political in this episode either. However, this is a big fucking deal. And a lot of people are having a whole wide variety of PTSD stirred up by this election. Feelings of not being safe in the world, feelings of being disenfranchised, and then all kinds of personal memories too, whether it be about racism or sexual assault or bullies in school or being surrounded by communities of bullies, historical PTSD, people who have immigrated to this country fleeing civil wars in their own countries, or people who have lived through great catastrophes. Even just, like I was talking to many people, it just kind of felt like watching the towers burn again, so a lot is stirred in the system. And I would love to just record an episode on like troubleshooting somatic meditation and pretend nothing's happening. That's not gonna be what's true for us. And I in particular, deal with issues of feeling safe in the world. So that pot is very much stirred for me. So Vanessa and I were talking about like, what do we do? How do we be authentic and address this? And so I think we have to talk about how do we deal with kind of all of the energy that's in the collective right now and all of the PTSD that's in the collective right now, and see where it goes. So for those of you listening, I think you get it, but we're really in process today and feel pretty gut punched and scared. So we'll sort it through as we go. What do you think, Vanessa?
This is interesting territory because the conversation is really not meant to be about right or wrong or globalizing or catastrophizing. I think you and I are really trying to figure out for ourselves what we were saying just a few minutes ago before we jumped on the podcast, which is, where is sanity? In times like this, whichever way you voted, or if you're outside of the country, whichever way you would have voted, because I'm sure a lot of people were following this, It's a time of shifting tides right now. There is a lot in the air. And, for us in particular, we tend to be pretty people-minded. And being people-minded, my biggest concerns as the election results unfolded were for the safety of people who are not seen as the majority, and so we're really talking about how to differentiate between how this is affecting you on a very personal level, how the collective is responding, how you can treat your loved ones. I mean, even that, Brooke, I don't know, social media, you all must be feeling this by now, wherever you stand with this. Social media is such an interesting thing. There's so much divisiveness. And then there's also a lot of news and information. I mean, I'm vacillating between sitting and wanting to see it all, wanting to stay with the truth. Because if anything, I feel like right now, a lot of truths have been exposed about where the collective is at, what's on the collective mind, what is in the unconscious of our collective. And so I want to stay really present because I want to see what's true? And I want to see it in a very unflinching way, because how can we deal if we don't know what's true? And then also feeling completely overloaded, completely overwhelmed, not sure which news to pay attention to, noticing people putting other people down. And so even as I'm talking now, I can feel a certain level of numbness and dissociation in the background of my sentences. My brain feels fogged and feel a little nauseous. And I think that for me, a lot of it is collective. There's so much energy. And then on a personal level, I'm just trying to sort through, I guess, what I feel like is one of the root traumas, that people just can't make space for other people to exist as they are. I just don't get that. And maybe that's my personal trauma, as we're looking at this, moments like this, any big moment. September 11th was like this for us Americans, and people all over the world have moments. All of these big moments, they bring up things for you, whether you are a conservative who voted for Trump and you're standing there and something that some liberal friend is saying is pushing an old trauma for you, or whether you voted for Hillary and the fact that Trump got into power, quote unquote, and he ran on a platform of fear that's triggering something for you. I think we all in big moments of shifting tides have a personal experience. And I guess for me, the very personal part is why can't we just make space for people to exist who are different than us, think, feel, act different than us? So I don't know, Brooke, right now for me, my main question is, how do I come back to sanity? Because I feel very triggered. I've talked to a lot of clients that are triggered. We've had some of you email us that are triggered. And I feel very clearly that if we can't come to a place of sanity and contact clarity, that all of our movements are very likely to be grouped back into that fear category. And this doesn't mean don't act, right? So how do we find that sanity and clarity so that whatever action we personally feel is right is coming from that place and is not a movement of fear or ignorance? Because in a way, that's what's so scary about this whole cycle of events.
Yeah. And it's, you're not saying don't act, and you're also not saying don't be upset. So this isn't an episode about how to turn that frown upside down or silver lining, let's look on the bright side. None of that stuff. It's really just that, for me, I feel very, 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 in my harder moments with this, just collapse. I can't attend to my normal life, in the way that I would. So I can't act from clarity. I can't access clarity at all. So I can't know what the next best thing to do is. I'm just in this kind of spinning haze, which doesn't help anything. It's not useful. So finding clarity, finding sanity in those moments when it feels genuinely like one of those big traumatic gut punches and you're in it. Like it's not an event that happened. Like it's an event that's unfolding and we don't know. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what this means for our country and for the world. And for just the people who are our friends and live in our communities and what that's going to look like. So clarity. Okay. A few things that have been helpful to me. And also like grieve, definitely grieve. So none of this is meant to shut down those processes, but.
Well, maybe first and foremost grieve. It's almost like if that's what's up, some people that's not at all what's up.
Yeah.
And that is totally fine. But first and foremost, like you can't shift anything until you experience the truth of something.
Yeah.
And we talk about karma. Karma is in our lineage of Buddhism, unprocessed experience that you couldn't sit with. So any which way that you move right now, if it's out of that alignment of sitting with the truth of your experience, you'll create more karma in your system. You'll store the seeds of these moments. And so commonly, like we want to either turn that frown upside down, like you were saying, Brooke, like people are like, just be positive, pick up. Like, so that might be like a positivity defense mechanism, and it could be true, but for a lot of us, it's a positivity defense mechanism. We want to hurry up and move on, or we want to move to action. We're going to fight the world and we're going to change it. And again, not wrong. But if you really tune into yourself, you can start to notice, when is that used to not feel what I'm feeling? Or we could numb out, or we could go to booze, or we can go to sex or food, or, all sorts of ways. And so I think the first step, like you were beginning to say, and I cut you off and I want to obviously go back to you, but is make space for whatever you're experiencing to arise as it's arising, so that you can then, it's like almost like clearing the air. So then you can move on to whatever else is up. It's like kind of like, to me, it's like the first step is like, well, what are you feeling? What's this evoking in you? Can you make space for that? And then we move on from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's hard because I would say, like, for me, this feels like a freight train running through my system. Like this is definitely one of the hardest things I've been through, and like I've seen some things. So this is
that's a lot for you.
Yeah, I know.
That shouldn't be funny, but I don't know.
But
I'm
it
laughing.
is a little ha 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 ha. Speaking of defense mechanisms.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, it's amazing how sticky fear is. And it's amazing how big, when you're trying to let yourself sit with the raw and processed emotions, like how big they are. So a couple of things that I'm noticing is that what doesn't help is for me to poke the beast, I don't want to pretend it's not happening, but like for me, Facebook right now is like self-injurious behavior. And it's compulsive and I can't stop. And I think it's because my fear system, like my amygdala, is just running like, what's going to happen to us? 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 And I feel like that's the place I can go to like see a feed of like, this is everyone's feelings and thoughts and yelling and heartbreak and articles. And, this is who he's appointed and this is what might happen. And this is the petition. And so I can see how it feels like something useful to do with this impotent, terrified feeling. But actually, every time I do it, so speaking of clarity, like, when I go on Facebook, do I feel like a spaciousness open up in my system? No, I feel so much worse. So I am not saying let's all pretend nothing's happening. And I'm also not saying that Facebook's a bad idea for everyone or social media generally. I'm saying for me, this is what's up, is like really feeling not safe in the world, which is a historic issue of mine too. And then for me, when I go on Facebook, I just fall apart. Mm-hmm. So not useful, right? Like, so just these little check-ins of like, how does it feel in my body, in my system, when I do that, And so another thing that I've tried is coming to like, okay, what's actually happening right now? And so slowing it down into the present tense is like, what's happening right now is I'm sitting in my living room recording an episode with you. If what was happening right now was that I saw a hate crime going on in front of my house, the movement would be clear, go intervene, go show up for that. But that's actually not what's happening right now. And so I feel like if I can stay in the present tense, which isn't easy to do because fear wants to drag me into my catastrophic future, which I'm not saying isn't going to happen. It might happen, but it hasn't happened and it's not happening right now. So again, I'm not trying to bright side it and say like, there's no way that would happen. That's not the message. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's not happening right now. So present tense, I feel like my personal, me, Brooke Thomas, my daily life and my moment by moment daily life helps unhook me from the terror feeling.
Yeah. I mean, what you were just saying, you didn't say these exact words, but you had spoken about this in the fear episodes where you were talking about this check-in. Am I okay?
Right.
And now it's just, are we okay?
Yeah.
Right? Are we okay? Are we okay? And that same hypervigilance that comes up when we grow up with a traumatic environment of, well, if I look hard enough and I see everything and I know what's coming my way, I can keep myself safe, is the same as like looking at social media, trying to scan for every story, right?
Yeah.
Like
if I know,
up, I can stay safe.
Yeah. I can get ahead of it and do something. Yeah.
Right. And that's again, coming back to that question of how do we reestablish safety and sanity, right? Because if we don't feel that, then it's too hard to understand what's moving us. Like, are we moving out of defense and fear, or are we moving out of clarity? And we may still choose the same action, but how we move could define how it gets distributed, who picks up on it, how it flows, right? And I was thinking, like you made sure to make this personal. And for me, in a way, social media up until today, and I don't think it was social media. I think it was because I saw who Donald Trump appointed. And that was just actually a very hard bit of data to sit with.
Yeah.
But up until then, I have found it useful. It's like sometimes in Buddhist practices, you'll do things like sit with wrathful deities and stare at them. And you'll sit with your fears and stare at them. It's like what Buddha did. If any of you have ever heard the story of how Buddha got enlightened, it's like he just went and sat under a tree and didn't move until he saw truth. And while he was sitting there were all of these demons coming to him. And they really use the word demons, the demon of jealousy and the demon of desire and the demon of envy, all just coming at him, all of his demons. And he just sat and he looked at them with equanimity. Unflinching. And Christ, there's the same story of Christ in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's like we can see in spiritual traditions that this unflinching warrior stance that doesn't move into judgment, doesn't move into catastrophizing, globalizing, compartmentalizing, judging, all of these different things, but just sees and witnesses and sits with, and maybe even develops compassion for and understanding around that. That's what I feel like, if anything, could be used right now. And as I was sitting with social media, for me personally, that's what it felt like. It felt like, okay, here's my alchemical practice. I'm going to see what's happening. I'm not going to, because I have a habit historically of like wanting to cozy up with a cup of tea and pretending the world's not happening. Mm-hmm. Which unfortunately most of my clients won't let me get away with.
Yeah.
But that's my go-to. Some of you maybe move to action. I'm like, well, let me just cozy and pretend like the world is fine. And so for me, the opposite movement of you was bringing a certain yes to the system. Not yummy.
Right.
But yes, this feels right. So everybody's tuning into themselves here with this really honest, caring evaluation of how do I reestablish safety in my system if for you safety has been rocked? And where is sanity for me? Where is clarity? How do I access that? And then I think we are responsible for our minds, aren't we? I mean, we can put it all out there. We can say Donald Trump is such and such, or who he appointed is such and such, or the people who, have left hate crimes are such and such. And we can do that. But how are we involved in this? Like, what is our part to play? And those are the kinds of things we have to understand to have real truth and clarity as a part of this equation. So I think we first make that experience for whatever's coming up to come up unflinching. And then we understand from this really honest, not who we want to be, but who we are kind of caring way, what's going to serve the greatest right now? How do I move with this? Because I don't know, I know I'm saying too many words, but Brooke, I wanted to bring in this metaphor that I've been thinking about a lot. A couple of years ago, I saw Marianne Williamson at a yoga journal conference. And I know you know who she is, but for those of you who don't know who Marianne is, we'll include her in the resources, but she's a spiritual teacher. She's been around a really long time. And she's also very political. And she ran for office in California and everything. So she's a really unique blend. You may appreciate reading her right now. But Marianne was talking a long time ago about the human body. And she was saying all of the cells in the body start off undifferentiated, like all the same potential. Every cell has the same potential. And as we're developing, as the embryo is forming and everything, one cell decides to be a liver cell, and one a kidney, and one a brain. And then they all function separately. And we need it to be like that, like not separately as in not interconnected, but as in I do liver things, you do kidney things, someone else does brain things. And that really, if a cell doesn't do what it is now meant to do, that's what cancer is.
Right.
And she was using this analogy because it's like everyone is going to deal with life and meet it and try to bring clarity and love and source in a unique way. And it's meant to be like that. Not everybody is the revolutionary who's going to get out and like demonstrate all day. Maybe they're the poet. And when they finally reestablish a sense of like alignment, that's where they're going to go. They're going to pick up their pen, and maybe someone else is like going to go to the children, and they're going to go into the school systems and they're going to teach. And, maybe I'm going to teach meditation, and, we're all going to have a very different thing that this type of shifting landscape is going to bring out in us. And we may know what that is, and we may not even yet. And that's why I think what you're saying is so important is how can we take this personal view? Because that's where the alchemy is, right? Like making space for source to come through, how it comes through, and then recognizing and not judging our fellow citizens because theirs might be coming through a different way, AKA maybe they're not demonstrating next to you.
Right.
And that doesn't mean they don't care.
Right. Yeah. Like I think sometimes we can get really big, like we can just think in pieces that are too big, meaning that big thing going on way over there. Like, how do I affect it or change it or make sure that, people are safe and whatever. And we don't get to have the whole big piece, thank God. Like we only get to have how it shows up for us in our lives. And it's helpful to hear you talking this through because I know this cognitively, but it doesn't matter because that doesn't mean jack shit when I'm in like a trauma state in my body and I don't know it experientially. So cognitively, I understand how important clarity is, how important it is that I can get to a place where I can be, functional in my world and show up for what needs to be shown up for based on what comes to me when it comes to me, cognitively totally get it, but experientially I'm just caught, I'm caught in the, shaky, catastrophic place, which is fine. And you and I were talking before we started recording too, like it's very much been just different waves, all different kinds of waves of things. You know, like right now, actually, while we're recording, I got on Facebook right before we got on stupidly. And I'm like reading about, oh God, all these hate crimes and all these awful things. And, you know, teachers telling students that the government's going to come take their parents and send them back to Mexico and they're going to go into foster care. This actually happened. So I'm reading these things and I'm just like raw, you know, I'm really raw right now while we record, which is kind of interesting. You know, and yesterday I could have this genuine experience, not cognitive or coping mechanism understanding of like, okay, like, so this is what's happening. And so this, I don't know what it means. I really don't know. Like maybe this is a way of really bringing to light a lot of ugliness that's managed to just get by in the shadows. And so we'll learn how to, you know, we're a nation of, if any nation ever has had to figure out love and diversity, like we are tasked with that. And so maybe this is our chance to really on both sides see, you know, like that everyone has obviously not felt seen, because no matter who you voted for and no matter why you voted for whomever you voted for, there's a lot of flailing right now. You know, there's a lot of like desire for massive change, obviously, because it's happening. So I've had those moments too. It's really, it has this wave-like quality. So it's okay when the wave kind of gets up on the rocks again for a little bit. But
well, you know, I've had the same super epiphany-like awakening moments, like as if I'm seeing the truth of everything, and then others where I'm in despair and I'm in depression, and, you know, others where my heart, you know, frankly, one thing I can say is my heart is broken open.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. And that's the beauty of it. I kind of like what you said, this nation right now is tasked with looking at this. Like, what is love, and how do we coexist, and how do we make space for? And, you know, we have a very interesting history of genocide, you know, of
slavery,
empowerment, of violence, of slavery. And we also have a history of trying to defend the rights of freedom for people, like all over the place. You know, we have welcomed so many immigrants into this country over the years, and we have a history of, and okay, it's all a mixed bag, but you know, it's all of it, right? It's all of it. And that's probably like on a personal level, a lot of us, like you have beautiful aspects of self where you're so open-hearted, you're so full of compassion, you're so kind and thoughtful. And you have other areas where ignorance is, and where judgment is, and where hate is, even if it's just against yourself. You know, it's like we are all as humans, I guess, tasked with sitting with this, and like, how do we find our way through these very human things like judgment and hate and trying to make everyone like you, and fear. I mean, it's very, very human and historical. It's wonderful that it's out for conversation. Let's hope we don't make it situational and we start to recognize these roots, which are very, very human roots. And I think we can all look at it from a personal level. Where do we contribute, and where do we support change? And then I think there's this collective piece, Brooke, that we touched upon but can't be denied. I mean, besides those of you who have experienced some measure of PTSD, or maybe you're just a parent, which is a particularly hard place to be in with shifting tides. And PTSD, by the way, it doesn't just mean you've been through something shitty. I just want to be clear. If you've ever been on the other side of hate, racism, sexism, you know, judgment, abuse, like if you've ever been on the other side of hate right now, you might be experiencing PTSD. I just want to clarify. So even if you're not in any of those camps, if you're a Sensi, there's a lot of trauma in the air.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure I've told you this, Brooke, before, and I wish I had a better memory, but years ago when I was at school at CIIS and studying psychology, I saw this study and they were talking about monkeys. I want to say it was rhesus monkeys, and they were studying the depressed monkey in the tribe. Have I ever told you this one?
No, I don't think so.
No? Oh my gosh. Okay, because I talk about this one a lot. Well, anyway, so there's, monkeys get depression. And so they found a monkey in a tribe who was depressed, and they would study this, and they wanted to see what would happen anthropologically, sociologically, like what if we took the depressed monkey out of the tribe? What would happen? And, my mind immediately when I was reading the study was kind of filling in the blank that like if you took the depressed monkey out, like another depressed monkey would show up, like almost as if that was like just a role that for some reason needed to be played. Well, what happened was shocking. It was the tribe would die.
What?
Yeah. And that's why I really wish I found the roots of this study so I can like clarify all the details. But what the people were hypothesizing at the time, and this is the part I wanted to share, is that there was a need for the sensitive monkey who was sensing problems that were not being spoken about. It was sensing things that weren't being addressed earlier. It was like we were talking about in the fear episodes, kind of like the early detection system, so to speak. And that what they died from was just actual problems. Like it wasn't like, oh, without that depressed person, we're just going to. So I feel like that sometimes about sensitive people. You'll see them come up with problems in certain cities and problems with certain, it's like, they're the early detection system to say, hey, you know what? There's a real fucking problem here. And they're the first ones in their family units to have been trying to get everything to change, and no one wants to. Like the family unit is kind of slothful, and we'll see it in our country. And, so that can be happening right now. And I do think it's part of my story because the emotions keep coming without dialogue for me.
Yeah. There's
no dialogue. It's just hitting me. Mm-hmm. And there is a personal level that is absolutely true as well. So that may be up. And that may be up, as we said, if you voted, didn't vote, not in this country, whatever team you were on, so to speak. Just feeling into the chaos, the collective unrest, the pain that is very much at the surface right now, the fear that is very much at the surface right now, the hate, which some people would categorize as fear, that is very much at the surface right now. So there's a lot to sit with, especially if your eyes are wide open.
Yeah. So speaking of sitting with things, shall we do a little bit of the work?
Why don't you?
Yeah, I'll give a little preface. Okay. So we talked about it a little bit coincidentally, actually, at the end of our last episode on strategies for working with fear. And this is a spiritual teacher, Byron Katie, and she does something called the work, which is basically just a process of examining your thoughts. And it's a really useful way to slow yourself down, question whether or not your thoughts are actually 100% true. So it brings you right into present tense and truth and clarity, to see how you are when you're believing that they're true, like how do you operate in your life, to see how you would be without the thought. And then you turn the thought around, meaning you see the different mirror aspects of it, which all of these pieces of the process are just ways of unhooking this 100% reality, 100% true thing that we give to our runaway train thoughts. So she has something called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, which we'll link to in the show notes. And what it basically is ideally you do this work about a person who is not you, something that isn't just something you decide to work on, but it's like really bothering you. It's the thorn in your paw. It's the thing that you're obsessing on and that's really troubling you. And then you write it out with the help of this questionnaire in your least PC, most bile-driven way. Because then you can actually get to the root of the thing, which is not 100% unequivocally true. It's what's up for you. So it's a very individual process. It's very unfiltered on purpose so that you can get to the roots. Like I could say something really more PC, like I'm worried about the direction of our country because I feel like love and equality are the way forward. Like you can't get anything out of that statement. You know what I mean? So the statement that I came up with before Vanessa and I got on our Skype call here to record this episode was, I am heartbroken. Let me pull it up so I can remember what I actually wrote. I'm heartbroken over my country choosing hate and ignorance in its recent election. And we could go with one or the other, hate or ignorance, or we can do both. Do you have a preference?
Leave it to you, but I do think it's good to have one solid statement. That would be my gut, because each one of those could probably be separated and worked with differently, I would think. Okay. They may bring up something unique for you, but I mean, I'm all game to go wherever you want to go. So you tell me if you want them both, then let's work with them both.
Let's go with, because I was just on Facebook before we did this and I'm reading about hate crimes. And that's one of the things, it's not the everything, but it's one of the things that's concerning me the most. Let's go with hate. It's also in terms of like, we're demonstrating this, but I'm also going through it in real time. And it's a very clear thought. So it makes it easier to sort of demonstrate this is how the work
it's
works.
Like a real nugget. And we should say that we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, Brooke has actually used Byron Katie's work quite a bit in your own life, right? Mm-hmm. Like you've worked with people with Byron Katie.
Yeah, for many years.
It's very useful. And, by the way, did you all know that it was a complete coincidence that we did 3 episodes in a row, like getting comfortable with uncomfortable and like
and fear and all that.
2 fears.
We didn't know that was coming.
Completely coincidental. So, it's just us following up on that, like whether you give a shit about this election or not, because you really honestly may not, and no judgment on that. But this is one of the ways that we work with things. And we thought it would be useful to share it with you guys because we have had requests actually from some of you on social media that it would be wonderful if you could hear kind of how we relate with things, like how our minds work and where we go, because as you all have very clear insight into, we still struggle with lots of being human. We don't anticipate getting over that anytime soon.
Nope. Yeah. Byron Katie for me is one of the places that I go to when I am in one of those terrified to the point of being non-functional places. Like it's just starts to break up the ice flow.
Yeah. Yeah. Because as you can get the sense of, well, first, any of you who've done therapy before, Byron Katie's work is kind of like a cognitive behavioral approach.
Yep.
It's just she formulated these questions so simply and so well. They're so useful. And you could do it on your own, like even if you've never been to CBT or have no experience with that. So that's really lovely. And what these questions are really unearthing for us is this underlying idea of what Brooke said, like we're hooked in, is that when you have these entrenched belief systems, they become problematic. Entrenched belief systems have the feeling of catastrophizing. They have the feeling of globalizing. Everyone is like this. I'm always like that. Life is always like this. It's going to be a nightmare. It's all future casting. And that means that you could say you're hooked somewhere. You're hooked into a belief system that's different than all is source. We are all one. We are all connected and love abounds, right? And Brooke and I work with that fundamental truth. We don't say we live there all the time. We do pop into that quite a bit. But that's the fundamental truth we're working with. So when you start to feel like you're caught, like you can't let go of a thought, you can't let go of a way of being, you're globalizing, you're catastrophizing, that's the perfect moment to employ tools like this. Would you say, Brooke?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's begin. So maybe go ahead and state your statement once more.
I am heartbroken over my country choosing hate in its recent election.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the first question. Is that true? Did the country choose hate in this recent election? Is that true?
My brain goes a few different places. One is, yes, this is a hateful man and we chose him. But when I skip to the next question, which I know is, can you absolutely know that it's true? Then I have to say, no, I can't absolutely know that it's true, because I certainly don't believe that all the people who voted for Donald Trump put in a vote for hate. I know that's not true. I know that a lot of people made that vote because they're tired of the status quo. I know a lot of people made that vote, many, because they genuinely believe this is the person who's going to bring us more safety, more prosperity. So no, they were not all voting for hate.
Maybe take a breath. It's a sticky one for you though, right?
It is. But what I love about the work with Byron Katie is that it feels like the exhale, feels like the unclench. As I go through it piece by piece, it shouldn't feel like forcing yourself to see it a different way or shaming yourself that you have the thought in the first place. It should feel like the exhale. So I'm shaking less. And people can maybe hear it in my voice too, because I was pretty shaky at the beginning of the call. So I'm starting to shake less with that.
You feel a little somatic relief.
That piece unbuttoned.
And that was just like 30 seconds of looking at the first two questions, which is it true? And can you absolutely know it's true? And you can all see like the absolute part is the part that really can break something up, because it's like beyond any ever shadow of a doubt. And when that happens, your mind expands.
Right.
To look for other truths that are possible.
Is such a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really strong. Okay, so let's go into the third question then. How do you react when you believe that thought that people chose hate in the election?
When I believe that thought, I am terrified. I get caught in trauma. I believe that we are all going to harm each other. I believe that it's the end of a country that I love. I get very emotional, obviously. I worry about my son. I worry about my loved ones. Mm-hmm. I worry about everything I care about in my life being taken away. I worry that the darkness, the worst of human nature, will take over and that we'll all suffer tremendously. So that's how I react when I believe that thought. Mm-hmm. I treat, and this is worth saying too, in the more daily life thing, I treat people differently. I have been walking around the world more suspicious. Like, what side are they on? Who did they vote for? Are they secretly filled with hate? Just people I encounter on the street? People who drive by me with their Trump bumper stickers? I treat the people that I love differently. I have a shorter fuse. I'm less able to deal with my life. I have less patience for my son taking too long to brush his teeth in the morning. Yeah. So all of that.
Okay. Who would you be without this thought?
Now, this is the part, every time I do the work, every fucking time, it's hard. And what's fascinating about it being hard is that I want to hold on to the thought because I believe, my ego believes, that if I hold on to the thought, I'm keeping myself safe. And that if I let go of the thought, I'm making myself unsafe.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to do. So what I will often do, what's worked for me in the past, because I have a hard time loosening my grip on the thoughts, is I will pretend that I'm either watching it happen to another person from the outside, or like, let's say an alien from another planet comes down who doesn't know anything about culture or values or rules or ethics or the thought. And they're kind of wondering why I would have the thought. Like, I have to go that far to imagine. Yeah. Like some being that's not of this world. Anyway. So who would I be without the thought, my country chose hate in its recent election? Who would I be without the thought? Okay. Without the thought, the basic thing is I would be less terrified if I couldn't believe the thought. Now, that's different than telling myself that it's not, that I'm not allowed to have the thought.
It,
right.
Judging it.
If I couldn't, literally was incapable of having the thought, I would be sitting in my living room talking to you on Skype. I would be breathing in and out. I would have more patience when my son was taking too long brushing his teeth in the morning. I wouldn't be regarding people in the world with suspicion. I feel a lot more spacious in my body. I don't feel the gut punch to my solar plexus right now as I'm saying it. So I actually somatically get a lot more expansive. And I also, when I do the work, I have to keep repeating it to myself because the sentence you come up with is personal and it holds power. It holds medicine. So who would I be if I couldn't believe the thought my country chose hate in its recent election? If I couldn't believe the thought. Because what we're going for here is not cognitive, it's felt. Who would I be if I couldn't believe the thought? I would just be more available for clarity, and I wouldn't be in agony. Like, just that's the simple thing. I wouldn't be in agony all the time, which is different than tuning out, not paying attention, going into la la land. It's just if I literally couldn't have that thought, I'd be more available to moment real life, not future tense catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds beautiful. That sounds beautiful. Okay, well, do you want to work on the turnarounds?
Sure. And we can do that a few different ways because the turnarounds are the part in Byron Katie's work that is very alchemical and powerful, but also very confusing. And then our teacher, Kieran Trace, who we work with, has adapted it in a way that we've worked with that's a little less confusing. So I'll leave it to you, whichever one you want to go to in terms of turnarounds.
I like Kieran's. I think it's user-friendly for this moment.
Sure.
For this particular moment while we're on a podcast, I think it's user-friendly. And I think Byron Katie does a pretty good job of explaining this. So those of you who are interested, go ahead and work with this. And, we're available to hear from you if you have questions and things like that after. So what Kieran would say after she took you through is this absolutely true kind of a system to help you break up some of these belief systems is what would be more true? What would be more true than the statement, my country chose hate in this recent election?
I don't know.
Yeah, and I can help you with it a little bit. Because it's interesting, we could say some people in this country choose hate.
Mm-hmm.
That's more true.
That is more true. And that breaks it down into a smaller size. Hate and ignorance will always be with us. And some of those people voted for that reason.
And some people voted because they were motivated from hate. We could also say many people did not. And we can also say that probably the majority of people, since Hillary Clinton won by a majority, did not choose racism or hate as a motivating factor. And so those would be more true statements already. How does that feel to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you sit with the statement, some people chose hate as a motivating force in this election. Mm-hmm. First, just see what that does to your system.
Well, it makes it feel less terrifying, right? Because I don't suddenly think, oh my God, who are these people in my community? We didn't all go crazy overnight. We're still decent human beings who treat each other with dignity and respect.
Yeah. And we could say many people chose love, and many others chose change. Because that's pretty broad. And a lot of people, as you already said to me, were really just looking for change. Whichever way they voted, they were looking for the change that they thought was going to make them and their loved ones safe, whatever that was.
Yeah.
What I like about What's More True, and, you know, if Kieran was here, she'd have a way better even What's More True statement to share. So maybe one day that will happen. But what I like about it is it's also not Pollyanna.
Right.
You know, like I spoke about this week on my personal stuff, I was talking about post-election PTSD, and I've spoken to a lot of clients who were experiencing PTSD or their children were. And, you know, to me, when someone's already been through hate and when someone's already experienced darkness, you can no longer tell them like, oh, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Like you can't debunk it anymore. You know, once truth comes out of the box, truth is truth. And it's like, so once you've experienced it, you know that the human life is complex, that bad things do happen to good people, and that there's like a darkness in the human experience that is inexplicable. Right. So then we can't make it better by saying no one chose hate. Right. Like we can't lie and make anything better. I mean, it doesn't make the world better and it doesn't bring relief to somebody. So especially if you've been through something and some of your old stuff is coming up, you have to be very mindful of how you talk to yourself. And we should all be mindful of how we talk to our neighbors, which is don't dismiss truth, you know, which is we don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, we don't really know who this person is, and we don't know what's going to evolve on any level. Could be better than we thought, could be worse than we thought. Like we don't know.
Or just different, all kinds of new potentials that we just can't even see.
Yeah.
We have really no idea.
Don't tell me it's going to be okay.
Right. Don't pretend. Don't go into pretend land. And don't pretend that, you know, my pain isn't real. And like you were saying, like that statement, some people chose hate. And like, yeah, some people chose hate. There's relief in that for me because it's like one of my racing ahead places that I go is I need to fix it. You know, I need to make no human being on planet Earth feel hate, right? It's like this crazy thing, but the mind does this, decides like I need to battle all hate on planet Earth and it needs to all go away, every speck of it, in order for me to be safe, which is crazy because it's an impossible construct. So I had a client actually coincidentally a week ago who was talking about, she works for a nonprofit, trying to eradicate homelessness. And she said to me, you know, why didn't I listen to Jesus Christ? Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. And for some reason, her thought came back to me because she was basically tackling, oh, I can't 100% remove every speck of this. I'm not in control, you know? And it came back to me after the election and it's like, hate will always be with us. Ignorance will always be with us. You know why? Because it is. Because it's a part of the human condition. So that kind of puts me out of needing to fix the world and back into where I've been before, which is trying to be a human being who lives a good and straightforward life and does as much good in the world as I can in my daily life.
And it calms your system down to where you could then say, okay, so what do I want to do about it? You know, from that place where you're not hooked into the limbic system, like we posted about that last week. Where it's like once you're in the limbic system, whether you're feeling victorious or whether you're feeling depressed right now, as soon as you're in us versus them thinking, red or blue, white or black, straight or gay, whatever us versus them thinking that you're in your limbic brain. And from there, you don't access higher states like compassion, like big vision thinking, like transcendence, you know, like oneness. So, you know, if we can all start to do the work, whether it's this like beautiful piece of work Brooke just did, or if it's breathing, or if it's yoga, or if it's getting out into nature, or if it's grounding into your feet right now, or if it's meditation. I led a beautiful meditation last week, and just to be together, like while we meditated, was so healing. Like wherever you go to reestablish some measure of safety, sanity, and clarity in your life, in your body, then you can choose like, from here, where's the unclench? Where's the exhale? Who am I? What cell am I? How do I need to engage with this? Because it's all different. We all have a part to play. And Source knows better than us, so get quiet, get clear, get grounded, and it will be revealed to you. It will come through you, and it's coming through you because it just does. You don't need to, there's nothing fancy about this, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Brooke, for sharing such a lovely and open-hearted piece of work. I hope all of you listening can really get something from that, how healing happens. We all wonder, I don't know about all of you, but I never had parents who taught me how healing happens. And I have to talk about that with a lot of people. Like, how do we heal? Giant question. Well, you all just saw a piece of how we go about healing. And this community that we have is here for us to have open conversations. So please share. And thanks for listening.
Thanks, sweetie. And thank you, everyone. We're sending you all tons of love, no matter where you're at with this big process going on.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. It was an interesting one, but some of you requested having a more up close and personal look at how we think and process things. So we hope you enjoyed that. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website and scroll down, you'll see each episode separate post, and the resources are right in there. You can also come play with us and join the conversation on the social media channel of your choice. Instagram and Facebook are really where we're most available, and we're Bliss and Grit at all of those spots. If you want to support us in the show, please write us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or even Facebook, which helps us to know how we're doing. But as we said in the beginning, it also helps other people find the show. If technology isn't your thing, but you're enjoying it, well then please just tell your friends who you think it might resonate with. A huge bit of gratitude to all of you who've already left reviews, like Kirsten03, like Z House, like Becca Di Liberto, like Sports Dude, and so many others. Here's one that I just wanted to take a moment to read from Arlene Live's Instagram. I love listening to these ladies muse upon the navigation of a spiritual life in a material world. For anyone who seeks to live deeper and revel in the mysteries of life and to have an understanding of how to love it all, the bliss and the grit, this podcast is for you. Thanks so much for that, Arlene, and we'll be back next week.